pregnant and alone. She saw him on a bench in the rain holding red roses. He was the Mafia boss who... Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The rain was falling heavily, soaking the streets and creating puddles that shimmered like mirrors under the streetlights. The sound of the rain was all that could be heard in the empty park, where a lone figure sat on a bench, a red rose in his hand, staring into the distance. Isabella Santos, 24 years old, her heart heavy with the weight of the world, walked briskly, trying to shield her baby bump with her coat as she hurried to get out of the rain. Alone, pregnant, and struggling, her thoughts were consumed by the overwhelming responsibilities of her future and the uncertainty of her situation. She had never imagined that her life would lead her here, stranded in a city that felt colder and more distant with every passing day. With each step, her mind wandered back to the moment she found out she was pregnant. The excitement, the fear, the sense of being unprepared, it all swirled in her chest. But it was her loneliness that weighed the most. Her boyfriend, the man who had promised her the world, was nowhere to be found. He had disappeared, leaving her alone to face the consequences of a decision that had been made in a moment of love and hope. As she neared the park, she saw him, the man on the bench. She didn't know why she stopped walking, why she turned her head to take in the sight of him. Perhaps it was the roses in his hand, or the calm, collected way he sat, as if nothing in the world could move him. His eyes were dark, deep, and filled with an unspoken intensity. Something in his gaze held her in place, as if he were silently commanding her attention. She took a cautious step forward, instinctively wanting to move away, but her feet felt glued to the ground. There was something about him that was different, something dangerous, yet oddly compelling. The moment their eyes met, the world around them seemed to blur. The sound of the rain, the distant hum of city traffic, it all faded as their connection became the only reality. Without thinking, she crossed the path that led to the bench, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the rain-soaked grass. As she reached the bench, the man stood, his movements deliberate and smooth. He was tall, with a presence that seemed to demand attention, a silent authority that spoke volumes without a word. He took a step toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're alone," he said softly, his voice like velvet, yet with an undeniable strength beneath it. "And you're pregnant." Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. How could he know? "Who are you?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound composed. He smiled, a small, knowing smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Someone who knows how to take care of things that need looking after," he replied. "And I think you're exactly what I've been looking for." The words sent a shiver through her. Something told her that this was no ordinary man, that he wasn't just any stranger in the park. He was something else, something powerful, something that could change the course of her life forever. As she stood there, unsure of what to say, he held out the rose to her. "Take it," he said. "It's a symbol of protection, of new beginnings." She hesitated for a moment, but then, something in her gut urged her to take it. As her fingers brushed against his, she felt a spark, a connection that was both thrilling and terrifying. Little did she know, this chance encounter would not only change her life, but bind her to a world she had never imagined, a world where danger, loyalty, and love would collide in the most unexpected ways. As Isabella took the rose, the world around her felt like it had paused for just a moment. Her fingers brushed against the man's, and despite the chill of the rain, a warmth spread through her. She hesitated for only a second before taking the rose fully into her hand. The moment felt surreal, but there was something in his presence that made her feel like this was exactly where she was meant to be. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know this is unexpected, but you're not as alone as you think." The rain continued to fall, but it no longer mattered. Isabella had never been more aware of her own heart beating in her chest. His gaze was magnetic, pulling her in despite the flood of uncertainty. She looked down at the rose, its red petals delicate against the harshness of the storm, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. She glanced up at him. Why me? She asked quietly. Why did you choose me? He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady. Because you're strong, and you don't even know it yet. I see it in the way you carry yourself. In the way you protect what matters to you. Isabella frowned, confused. What do you mean? You're pregnant, he said, his words heavy with meaning. But you're not just carrying a child. You're carrying the future. And I need someone strong beside me. Someone who can handle what's to come. Isabella stepped back, suddenly overwhelmed. She barely knew this man. And yet, he spoke to her like he had known her whole life. She shook her head, trying to make sense of it. I don't understand, she whispered. What future? The future of a family, he said softly. A family I will protect at all costs. And that includes you. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. What do you want from me? Isabella's voice wavered as she asked, still unsure of her own emotions. Nothing yet, he replied, his lips curling into a small smile. But I will. I always get what I want. Isabella felt a shiver run through her, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, something that made her wonder if she was standing at the crossroads of her destiny. You don't know me, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I'm just an ordinary woman. I'm just trying to make it through each day. And that's exactly why I chose you, he replied. His gaze softened. You're not just anyone. You're special. You're exactly what I need. Isabella's heart raced as she absorbed his words. There was something unsettling about the way he spoke, as though he already had a plan for her, as though she was already part of something much bigger than herself. Before she could respond, the man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small business card. He handed it to her. Take this, he said. Call me when you're ready. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you. Isabella took the card, her fingers brushing against his once more. She felt the weight of his words settle in her chest, and for the first time, she felt a pull, a connection that she couldn't explain. Who are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a flash of something dangerous in his eyes. I'm someone who doesn't let go, and I never leave anything unfinished. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the rain, clutching the rose and the business card, her mind reeling. As she watched him disappear into the misty night, a voice in her head kept repeating, what have I just gotten myself into? But no matter how hard she tried to convince herself to leave, to forget about him, there was something deep inside her that knew she wouldn't be able to. Not anymore. That night, she went home to her small apartment, the city outside drenched in rain and life going on as usual. But inside, everything had changed. She couldn't shake the feeling that the world she had known was slipping away, replaced by something unknown, something that involved this man, the Mafia boss who had appeared out of nowhere and turned her world upside down. She sat on the edge of her bed, the rose still in her hand, and wondered what would come next. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be long before he would come for her again. She had no choice but to wait. And she wondered, what would she do when he did? Isabella couldn't stop thinking about him. The man with the dark eyes, the Mafia boss who had crossed into her life with such quiet certainty. After that night in the rain, she had returned to her small apartment, unable to shake the feeling of his presence. His words echoed in her mind, his touch lingering on her skin. You're not alone anymore. What did that mean? Who was he really? Why did he choose her? The questions had been gnawing at her for days. She didn't know if she should be scared or grateful. But despite herself, she knew she couldn't walk away. Not after what had happened. Not after how he had made her feel seen, in a world that had otherwise been cold and distant. That evening, as she tried to focus on the quiet hum of her daily routine, there was a knock at her door. Isabella froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. She stood there for a moment, heart pounding in her chest, before she slowly walked over and peered through the peephole. The sight on the other side made her breath catch in her throat. It was him. The man. The Mafia boss. Without thinking, she opened the door, her hand trembling as she gripped the knob. There he stood, as imposing as ever, his dark suit a sharp contrast to the rainy night outside. He held a bouquet of red roses in one hand, and his eyes locked onto hers with the same intensity that had paralyzed her the first time they met. You're not going to get rid of me that easily, he said, his voice smooth and confident, like he knew exactly what to say to put her at ease and make her heart race at the same time. I told you, you're not alone. Isabella's mind raced. Was this really happening? Was he really standing there, in front of her, after everything that had happened? Her body responded before her mind could catch up, and she found herself stepping back to let him in. She knew she should resist, that this was dangerous, that getting involved with him was risky beyond measure. But something inside her, something deep down, was telling her to trust him. Why are you here? She asked, her voice shaky. I told you, he replied, stepping inside the apartment with a calm confidence that made her heart flutter. You belong with me now, and I'm not leaving until you understand that. Isabella swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. You don't even know me, she said softly, her eyes not leaving his. He smiled, a small, almost knowing smile. I don't need to know you the way you think. I can see you. I see the way you fight, the way you're protecting something precious. She blinked, confused. I don't understand. You're pregnant, he said, his voice soft but certain. And I know what that means. It's not just about the baby, it's about everything you're carrying. And I can help you carry it. Isabella looked away, her mind swirling. What was he talking about? She barely knew him, and yet here he was, offering help, offering protection, in a way she never thought possible. I don't need your help, she whispered. I can do this on my own. He reached out then, placing the roses on her coffee table, and gently cupped her face in his hand, tilting her head so she was forced to look at him. I'm not offering help, Isabella, he said, his voice low and steady. I'm offering a life where you don't have to do this alone, where you can have everything you've ever wanted, and more. His words struck her like a chord, resonating deep inside her. She felt a part of her open up, a part she didn't even know was there. She'd spent so long trying to make it on her own, trying to push through the pain and the fear of what the future held. But here he was, offering something different, something more than she had ever dreamed. She took a step back, unsure of what to do next. Her mind told her to push him away, to run and protect herself. But her heart said something else. It was whispering to her, telling her that this could be the beginning of something new, something that could change everything. I don't know what to do, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He smiled, his dark eyes warm with understanding. You don't have to decide now, he said gently. But know this, I'm not going anywhere. And I will do whatever it takes to protect you and that child. His words hung in the air, heavy with promise. And for the first time in a long time, Isabella allowed herself to believe in something more than just survival. She allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future where she wasn't alone, a future with him. And with that, everything began to change. As the days passed, Isabella found herself caught between two worlds. On one hand, there was the life she had been building for herself, a quiet existence. In her small apartment, balancing school and work while carrying the weight of her pregnancy. On the other, there was him, the Mafia boss who had entered her life with such force, with promises of protection and a life she never imagined she could have. She tried to focus on her studies, to keep her life as normal as possible, but his words lingered in her mind. I will protect you and your child. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the way his dark eyes seemed to see right through her, and how he made her feel like the only person in the world who mattered. The phone call came on a Friday evening, while Isabella was sitting on her couch, trying to finish a report for school. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something about it made her heart race. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Isabella, came the deep, familiar voice on the other end of the line. It's me. She sat up straighter, her heart skipping a beat. You've been on my mind, he continued. I know you have a lot going on right now, but I need to see you. It's important. His tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something she couldn't quite place. What did he mean by important? She couldn't help the way her curiosity surged. She had been avoiding him for days, trying to sort through her feelings, but now, the thought of seeing him again made her chest tighten. When? She asked, unable to keep the question from slipping out. Now, he replied. Isabella's heart pounded. She wasn't sure what he was asking, but she knew she couldn't ignore it. There was something about him that drew her in, despite all the reasons she should stay away. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said, already grabbing her coat and keys. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, she tried to calm the flurry of thoughts racing through her mind. She didn't know what was going to happen when she saw him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had no choice. He was a part of her life now, whether she was ready for it or not. The drive to the place he had given her was short, but it felt like an eternity. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, and with every passing second, the anticipation grew. When she finally arrived, she parked outside a lavish building, one she had passed countless times but never entered. The place was impressive, tall, grand, and intimidating. It was the kind of place that screamed power, money, and influence. Isabella stood in front of the door for a moment, taking a deep breath before she stepped inside. The atmosphere inside was just as imposing as the outside. Marble floors, large windows with views of the city, and security guards who seemed to watch every movement she made. It was all so overwhelming. A man in a dark suit greeted her as soon as she walked in, his face unreadable. "Mr. Romano is expecting you," he said, leading her down a long corridor. The walls were lined with paintings and expensive sculptures, each piece exuding wealth and sophistication. Isabella felt out of place, but she didn't dare show it. As they approached a large, ornate door, the man knocked before opening it for her. Inside, everything was exactly as she expected, luxury at every turn. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne, and the soft hum of quiet conversation filled the room. And there he was. He stood by the window, his back to her, staring out at the city below. His presence was magnetic, and she could feel his eyes on her even though his back was turned. "Come in, Isabella," he said, his voice low and steady. "I've been waiting for you." She stepped into the room, her heart beating faster with every step. He didn't turn to face her immediately, but when he did, his eyes locked onto hers, and she felt a jolt of electricity shoot through her. "You've been avoiding me," he said softly, his voice a mix of amusement and something darker. "Why?" Isabella swallowed hard. She wasn't sure what to say. There were 1,000 reasons she had been avoiding him, his world, the danger, the unknown. But as he stood there, so close, she couldn't bring herself to say any of those things. "I've just been busy," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly, as if he understood. "I get it," he said, taking a step toward her. "But I need to make sure you understand something, Isabella." She looked up at him, her breath caught in her throat. "What?" "You belong to me now," he said, his tone still calm but heavy with meaning. "Not just because of the child you're carrying, but because you're mine, and I will protect what's mine." The words hit her like a wave, washing over her in a way she couldn't fully process. Mine. She had heard him say it before, but now it felt different, more real, more pressing. Before she could respond, he reached out and gently cupped her face in his hand. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said softly. "You're safe here, with me." Isabella's heart raced. She didn't know what to think. She didn't know if she should be terrified or relieved. But in that moment, one thing was clear. Her life, her future, would never be the same again. As days turned into weeks, Isabella found herself adjusting to a new reality, one that was as luxurious as it was terrifying. The mansion she now called home was unlike anything she had ever imagined. Every corner, every hallway, exuded wealth and power. The kind of wealth that wasn't just about money, it was about control. And control was something her new world was built on. She had moved into one of the guest rooms, the walls adorned with elegant artwork, and the bed so large she could have fit her entire apartment in it. Every day, she felt the stark contrast between her old life and this new one. The servants, the quiet security, the ever-watchful eyes of the men in black suits. It all made her feel like she was part of something much bigger, something much more dangerous. But then there was him, Adriano Bella, the man who had taken her in, the man who spoke with such certainty and authority, the man who promised to protect her and the child she carried. She couldn't deny that he intrigued her. His presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. But despite the luxury around her, there was always an undercurrent of fear. The world he lived in wasn't just about wealth. It was a world of power, of dangerous men who did not hesitate to make their enemies disappear. One evening, as she sat in the grand dining room, a tray of food in front of her, she found herself thinking about the life she had left behind. The small apartment, the uncertainty, the constant juggling of work, school, and the fear of facing motherhood alone. But now, things were different. Now, She had the security she never thought she could have. But at what cost? I know you're wondering about the future. Adriano's voice broke through her thoughts. He had entered the room, his footsteps soundless on the marble floor. He walked toward her with the same quiet confidence he always had. She looked up at him, her heart pounding slightly. What do you mean? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He paused, standing by her side, his eyes never leaving hers. I know this isn't easy for you, he said, his voice softer than usual. But I can give you a life where you never have to worry again. A life where you and your child are safe, protected. You won't have to struggle anymore. Isabella swallowed, his words settling in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But part of her still hesitated. I don't know if I can just accept this, she said quietly. This life. This world. Adriano's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw a glimpse of something that wasn't about power or control. Something personal, something vulnerable. You don't have to accept anything you're not ready for, he said. But know this, you're part of my world now. And I'll make sure no one ever hurts you or your child. That's a promise. His words were heavy, filled with sincerity, and Isabella felt something shift inside her. She had always prided herself on being independent, on doing everything herself. But now, standing in front of this man, she realized that maybe she didn't have to do it all alone. And what about you? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. What do you want from me? Adriano tilted his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. I don't want anything from you, Isabella. I already have everything I need. I just want to make sure you and our child are safe. That's all. She stared at him, trying to read the depth of his words. She didn't know what it was about him, whether it was the way he looked at her, or the way he spoke, or the way he seemed to understand her fears without her saying a word. But in that moment, something in her heart shifted. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that this new life, his world, wasn't as dangerous as it seemed. She had always been cautious, always kept her distance from people like him. But now, she was standing in his world, and there was no turning back. I don't know what's going to happen, she said softly, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. But I'm scared. Adriano stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting at the same time. Fear is natural, he said gently, reaching out to touch her hand. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. His touch was warm, grounding her in a way that made her feel like she could finally breathe. You don't have to be scared, he continued, his voice low and soothing. I will take care of everything. You don't have to do anything. Just trust me. Isabella took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this life, for the world he was offering her. But one thing was certain, she couldn't turn back now. Whatever happened, whatever choices lay ahead, she knew that she was tied to him. And that was both terrifying and comforting at the same time. Days passed, and Isabella settled into a rhythm, a strange balance between the life she had known and the life Adriano was offering her. The mansion became both a sanctuary and a cage. The luxury that surrounded her was undeniable. Every corner of the estate was meticulously cared for, every room a testament to power and wealth. But as she wandered the halls, she often found herself wondering about the cost of it all. The walls were silent, and though the staff was efficient and courteous, she could never shake the feeling of isolation. She was alone in this massive home, even when Adriano was there. He was a constant presence, but still, there were things left unsaid. He had promised her safety. He had promised her protection. But what did that really mean? As she sat alone one evening, reading through some textbooks for her classes, she couldn't help but feel the weight of her decision. It had only been a few weeks since she had stepped into this world, Adriano's world, and yet, it already felt like everything was shifting beneath her feet. The child growing inside her seemed to be the only thing that remained constant. Adriano had kept his word about her safety, but what about her future? What did he want from her? She was about to find out. The knock on the door startled her. She had been lost in thought, and the sound felt jarring in the quiet of the house. When she opened it, the man standing in front of her was not Adriano, but someone she recognized, his right-hand man, Sergio. His expression was unreadable, his posture rigid. Mr. Bella asked for you, he said quietly, his voice low, as though carrying a weight of its own. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. Adriano had asked for her? It wasn't unusual for him to be busy, but the suddenness of the request made her feel uneasy. "What does he need?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Sergio didn't answer immediately, instead stepping aside to allow her to follow him. "He has a meeting. He wants you there," he said simply, his tone carrying no emotion. Isabella's stomach tightened. The thought of entering another world, Adriano's world, filled her with a mix of anticipation and fear. She hadn't fully understood what it meant to be involved with someone like him, someone whose power seemed limitless. And yet, she couldn't deny the strange sense of belonging that had slowly started to form inside her. As she followed Sergio through the sprawling halls of the mansion, her mind raced. She had to admit that she was intrigued, but there was still so much she didn't understand. She had never been involved with someone like Adriano, someone whose life was shrouded in mystery, whose every move was calculated with precision. When they finally arrived at the large conference room, the door opened with a soft click. Adriano was seated at the head of a long, polished table. His expression was unreadable as he looked up from a set of papers in front of him, and Isabella could feel the weight of his gaze on her. He didn't smile, but there was something in the way his eyes held hers, something that sent a shiver down her spine. "Sit," he commanded softly. There was no warmth in his voice, but there was an authority that made it impossible to refuse. Isabella took the seat he indicated, her body stiff with tension. The room was silent for a moment, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning. Adriano leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him, his gaze unwavering. "You've been here long enough to know what my world is like," he said, his voice calm, but filled with a force that made her listen. "But there are things you don't know, things you need to understand if you're going to be part of it." Isabella's heart beat faster. Part of her wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to demand answers. But another part of her, something inside her that had been growing since the moment she met him, was willing to listen. "You don't have to worry about your safety," he continued, his voice smooth and confident. "But you do need to understand that this world is not just about power, it's about loyalty, about trust. And you, Isabella, are now part of that." She looked at him, unsure of how to respond. Her mind was spinning, trying to process his words. Loyalty? Trust? She had never been part of anything like this. The world she had known was one of independence, of doing things on her own. But now, sitting here in front of him, she was forced to confront the reality of the choices she had made. Adriano's eyes softened slightly, though his voice remained firm. "I'm not asking you to understand everything right away," he said. "But you need to know that you are mine. And that means you are part of this family, whether you like it or not." Isabella's breath caught in her throat. She had heard him say it before. "You are mine." But now, it felt different. It felt like a promise, a commitment that she wasn't sure she was ready for. But then she thought of the baby inside her, of the future she had always dreamed of but never believed she could have. Could this be it? Could this strange, dangerous world be the key to everything she had ever wanted? She didn't know. But in that moment, she realized something. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything. Adriano stood, his gaze still fixed on her. "You'll learn," he said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "You'll understand what it means to belong to me. And when you do, you'll see that this is where you were always meant to be." Isabella's heart raced. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but deep down, she knew there was no going back. The choice had already been made for her, and for the first time in her life, she was going to follow wherever it led. The weeks that followed were a blur of adjustment and tension. Isabella was learning what it meant to be part of Adriano's world, and it was nothing like the life she had known. The mansion, once overwhelming in its size and grandeur, was now her home. But the quiet loneliness she felt in its vast halls was deafening. Adriano was everywhere, but never truly present. He was always in meetings, his attention pulled in countless directions, while Isabella was left alone to navigate the complexities of his world. The security, the staff, the men in black suits, everything about this life screamed power and control. She had always been independent, but here, she was a pawn in a game much larger than herself. Despite the unease that simmered beneath the surface, something inside her was drawn to Adriano, something she couldn't explain. She had seen sides of him that made her question everything she had believed about power, about loyalty, and about what it meant to love someone. One evening, Adriano invited her to join him for dinner. It was a rare moment. one she hadn't anticipated, and she wondered if it was a sign that things were finally shifting. She walked into the dining room to find a table set for two, the candles casting a soft glow on the marble floor. Adriano was already seated, his back straight, his expression unreadable. As she sat down across from him, the weight of silence hung in the air. "I've been busy," he said after a moment, his voice low and deliberate. "But I wanted to talk to you about something." Isabella nodded, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. "What is it?" "I know this isn't easy for you," he continued, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You're used to being on your own. But you need to understand that I'm not just offering you safety. I'm offering you a life. A future." She swallowed hard, the words sinking in. "A future," she echoed, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "Yes," he replied, his tone unwavering. "A future where you and our child are taken care of. Where you don't have to worry about anything. Ever." Isabella's breath caught in her throat. The promise of security, of not having to struggle anymore, was tempting. But there was a part of her that still hesitated. She didn't want to be tied to a life she didn't fully understand. "I don't know if I can just accept that," she said quietly. "I've always had to work for everything. I've never been able to rely on anyone." Adriano leaned forward, his eyes softening just slightly. "I understand," he said. "But you don't have to do everything alone anymore. Not with me. Not with us." He paused for a moment, studying her. "I can give you the world, Isabella. I can give you everything you've ever wanted. All you have to do is trust me." Trust. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Isabella had always been cautious with her trust, but something about him made it hard to resist. There was a part of her that wanted to believe him, to step into this world he was offering her. But was she ready? Could she truly let go of everything she had fought for on her own? "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her plate. "You don't have to say anything yet," Adriano replied, his voice soft but firm. "But know that this is real. Everything I've promised you, it's not just talk. It's a reality I'm offering." Isabella felt a mix of emotions, fear, excitement, confusion, all swirling inside her. But there was something else too. A pull, a desire to belong. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she realized that she didn't want to walk away from it. She didn't want to walk away from him. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can do this." Adriano reached across the table, his hand brushing hers with a tenderness that surprised her. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. "I'm here, and I'll never let you go." His words resonated deeply within her, stirring something she hadn't expected. She had never been one to rely on anyone, never been one to trust so completely. But the way he spoke to her, the way he made her feel like she wasn't just another piece in his world, it was different. And maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what she needed. For the first time in weeks, Isabella felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she could have it all. Maybe, just maybe, this world, his world, wasn't as dangerous as it seemed. As the evening went on, the tension between them eased, and for a brief moment, it was just the two of them, sharing a quiet dinner, the rest of the world outside the walls of the mansion. But in the back of her mind, Isabella knew that things would never be the same. She had stepped into a world she could never leave, a world where loyalty was everything, and where the future was written by the choices of men like Adriano. And though she didn't know what would happen next, she couldn't deny that she was beginning to see a life she never thought possible. A life with him. A life with everything he promised. The days that followed felt like they were moving faster than she could keep up with. Isabella had stepped deeper into Adriano's world, and though she still couldn't completely wrap her head around it, a part of her was starting to accept that this was her new reality. Her life, the quiet, solitary life she had known before, seemed like a distant memory now. The mansion, once intimidating and overwhelming, was beginning to feel like a place she could call home, even though the world outside its walls was still a mystery to her. Adriano had kept his promises. She was safe, she was protected, but she was also more entangled in this world than she had ever expected. There were days when she felt like a spectator, watching from the sidelines as Adriano navigated the dangerous waters of his empire. His meetings, his calls, his countless business dealings, all of it seemed to come with a price. And she, whether she liked it or not, was part of the equation. But in the quiet moments, when it was just the two of them, There was something between them that felt genuine. The way he held her, the way he looked at her, it was as though he really cared for her. In a life filled with shadows and secrets, his affection was the only light she could rely on. Yet, there was still a lingering question in the back of her mind. What was his endgame? Why was he so determined to keep her by his side? One evening, as she sat in the garden of the mansion, the cool air brushing against her skin, Adriano approached her, his footsteps soft on the gravel. She had been lost in thought, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees a welcome distraction. He sat beside her, his presence as commanding as ever. "You're quiet tonight," he remarked, his voice low and smooth. She turned to face him, trying to read his expression. "I'm just thinking," she replied, unsure of how to put her thoughts into words. "About what?" he asked, his gaze never leaving hers. "About everything," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "This life, this world you live in. It's not what I imagined." Adriano studied her for a moment before responding. "It's not what anyone imagines at first," he said softly. "But it's a life I can offer you. A life where you don't have to struggle. A life where you're mine, and nothing can touch you." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. He had said it before, but hearing him say it again, with that same certainty, made her feel like there was no escape. She was part of this world now, whether she was ready for it or not. "I'm not sure I understand what that means," she whispered. "What do you want from me?" Adriano's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on hers, the touch warm and reassuring. "I want you, Isabella. I want you and our child. I want to build something with you, something that's ours. But you need to trust me." She pulled her hand away slightly, her thoughts racing. "Trust," she echoed. "How do I trust a world I don't understand?" "You don't have to understand everything right now," he said, his voice steady. "All you need to do is trust me to protect you. Trust that I will do everything to keep you safe." Isabella closed her eyes, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had never been one to trust easily, and yet, there was something about Adriano that made her want to believe in him. In a way, it felt like she had no choice. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Adriano's gaze softened, but his resolve remained. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight," he said gently. "But I'll earn it day by day, and when the time comes, you'll see that this is where you're meant to be." Isabella looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was determination. In that moment, she realized that he wasn't going to let her go. Not now. Not ever. "What if I can't handle this?" she asked, her voice tinged with fear. "What if this world is too much for me?" Adriano leaned in closer, his presence overwhelming. "You're stronger than you know, Isabella. You've already handled more than you realize. This world, it's not easy, but I'm here to make sure you never have to face it alone." His words resonated deep inside her, and for the first time since she had stepped into his world, Isabella felt a sense of peace. Maybe she wasn't meant to handle everything on her own. Maybe this was the future she was meant to have. Maybe Adriano, with all his power and complexity, was the one who could give her the life she had always wanted, the one where she didn't have to fear the unknown. As she sat beside him, the rain beginning to fall softly around them, Isabella felt a strange sense of acceptance. She wasn't sure what the future held, or where this path would lead her, but she knew one thing for certain. She was in this now, and there was no turning back. The days began to blur together for Isabella, and despite the luxury that surrounded her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being swept along by a current much stronger than her. Adriano's world was consuming, and she was slowly being pulled deeper into it. At first, she had thought she could keep a distance, that she could keep some control over her life. But the more time she spent with him, the more she realized that wasn't an option anymore. He was everywhere, his presence a constant, an undeniable force that shaped everything around her. He had promised her safety, but she was starting to see that there was so much more at play. One evening, after a particularly intense day of meetings, Adriano returned home later than usual. Isabella had been waiting for him, as she always did, the mansion quiet and empty without him. She was beginning to feel like a prisoner to her own thoughts, the isolation of her world becoming more palpable with each passing day. When Adriano finally stepped into the room, there was something different about him, an air of frustration, maybe even anger, that she hadn't seen before. He wasn't the same calm, controlled figure she had grown used to. His sharp eyes met hers, and for a moment, they locked in a silent understanding. "What's wrong?" Isabella asked, unable to hide the concern in her voice. Adriano ran a hand through his hair, a rare sign of agitation. "It's nothing," he said dismissively. "I just had a bad day." Isabella could tell it was more than that. He was always so composed, so unshakable, that seeing him like this made her uneasy. "You know you can talk to me," she said, her voice softer now. She had begun to understand him more in these past few weeks, his strength, his control, the weight he carried on his shoulders. But he was still a mystery to her in many ways. He shook his head, though the hardness in his gaze never left. "Not tonight," he muttered. "I just need to clear my head." Isabella wanted to press him, to ask more, but she didn't. There was something in his demeanor that told her not to. So, instead, she remained quiet, watching as he moved toward the bar, pouring himself a drink. The silence between them was thick, but she couldn't ignore the growing unease inside her. Something was off, and she wasn't sure what it was. He turned back to her, and for a moment, their eyes locked again. This time, though, it was different. There was something almost apologetic in his gaze, something that made her heart flutter. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, regretful. "I didn't mean to shut you out." Isabella took a step toward him, her heart racing. "Adriano, you don't have to carry everything on your own," she said softly. "I'm here." He let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging slightly. "I know," he said, looking at her with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "But this life, it's not something you can just walk into without understanding what it takes, what it costs." Isabella felt a pang of sympathy. She had known that when she entered his world, there would be things she didn't understand, things that would challenge everything she thought she knew. But she had never imagined it would be this difficult. "I can handle it," she said, though there was a part of her that wasn't entirely sure. She had always been strong, but this world was unlike anything she had ever known. Adriano's expression softened, and he reached out, taking her hand in his. "I don't want to drag you into this," he said quietly. "But I need you, Isabella. More than you know." His words hit her like a wave. She had known he was powerful, but she had never realized how much of his world rested on her now. He had made her a part of something bigger than herself, something that could easily destroy her if she wasn't careful. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear that crept up in her chest. "I'm with you." Adriano gave her a small, appreciative smile, his hand tightening around hers. "I'm glad," he said quietly. "Because this world, it's dangerous. More dangerous than you realize. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect you." Isabella felt a rush of emotions, fear, love, loyalty, all swirling together. She knew this life wasn't going to be easy, but she had already crossed the line. She had already chosen him. And now, there was no going back. The days passed, and things didn't get any easier. The more Isabella learned about Adriano's world, the more she understood the danger that came with it. He was a man who controlled everything around him, but even he couldn't control everything. There were enemies lurking, threats she couldn't see but could feel in the air. She had to stay close to him, had to be by his side, or she would be vulnerable. And there were moments when she questioned whether she was strong enough for this life. But every time she looked at him, saw the way he watched over her, the way he protected her, she knew there was no other choice. She was part of this now, for better or worse. Adriano had made that clear. And as the days wore on, Isabella came to realize something. There was no way out of this world now. And in some strange way, that terrified her. But it also gave her something she had never had before. A sense of purpose. A sense of belonging. The weeks continued to pass, and with each day, Isabella felt herself growing more intertwined in Adriano's world, a world that was as captivating as it was dangerous. The mansion that had once seemed like a gilded cage was now a place she found herself calling home. She had come to understand the rhythm of life here, the luxury, the power, the constant presence of Adriano's people who moved like shadows around her. But no matter how much she tried to adapt, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something lurking beneath the surface, something she still didn't fully understand. Adriano was a man of few words when it came to his personal life, and though he had promised to protect her, there were moments when she felt more like an observer than a participant in his world. It wasn't just the danger that came with his position in the Mafia that worried her. It was the constant pull between the two versions of herself, the woman she was before, independent and strong, and the woman she was becoming now, more dependent on him than she had ever been. It was a struggle, one that weighed heavily on her. One evening, Adriano returned home after a long day of meetings and phone calls. Isabella had been waiting for him, as she had done every evening since their lives became more intertwined. She had been sitting on the couch, her thoughts wandering, when he walked into the room, his presence filling the space. His usual calm demeanor was absent. Instead, there was a tension in the air, something she hadn't seen from him before. "You've been quiet," she remarked softly, setting aside the book she had been reading. Adriano's eyes met hers, and for a moment, he didn't say anything. His jaw was clenched, his eyes dark with something she couldn't place. Finally, he sighed and walked over to her. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low, almost pained. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "It's about the business," he began, pacing slightly as he spoke. "There's been a shift. Some of my associates have been making moves without my permission, and it's caused a problem I need to deal with." Isabella watched him carefully, sensing the weight of his words. "What kind of problem?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adriano stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression hardening. "It's nothing for you to worry about," he replied quickly, but there was an edge to his voice. "I'll take care of it." "I want to help," she said, standing up and stepping toward him. "I can't just sit here and do nothing." Adriano shook his head. "This is not your world, Isabella," he said, his voice a little sharper than before. "I won't put you in danger." Isabella felt a sharp pang of frustration. "I'm already in danger, Adriano," she said, her voice trembling. "You're not the only one who has a stake in this. I'm carrying your child, and I'm not going to sit by and pretend like I don't matter." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Adriano's expression softened, and he stepped closer to her, his eyes searching hers. "You matter more than you know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "And I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. But you have to trust me." Isabella felt her heart racing, torn between her desire to be part of his world and her fear of what that might mean. "I don't know how to trust this world," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can do this." Adriano reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands, his touch grounding her. "I don't expect you to understand everything," he said softly. "But I need you to trust me when I say that I will protect you, no matter the cost." She looked up at him, her heart in her throat. His words, his touch, everything about him made her feel like she was caught in something she couldn't control. And yet, despite the fear, there was also something else, a pull, a deep connection that she couldn't ignore. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I don't know what this will mean for us, for our future." Adriano's eyes softened with something that looked like genuine compassion. "I'm scared too," he admitted, his voice low. "But we'll face it together. Whatever happens, we do it together." Isabella swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. She didn't know if she was ready to fully embrace this life, but she knew she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when everything she had ever dreamed of, love, safety, a family, was within her grasp. Adriano leaned in, his lips brushing her forehead in a soft kiss. "You don't have to be scared," he murmured. "I'm here." In that moment, Isabella realized that there was no turning back. She had already stepped into his world, and now, no matter what happened, they would face it together. The storm that had been brewing inside her began to calm, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. A hope that despite the dangers and uncertainties ahead, they would find a way to make this life work, for their child, for their future, and for the love that had already begun to take root between them. As Isabella adjusted to the days that blended into one another, the weight of her situation started to settle in. Adriano's presence, once comforting, was now something that carried its own set of challenges. The life he had promised her, the one that seemed to offer safety and security, also came with a darkness she couldn't ignore. She had learned more about the world he was involved in. The secretive meetings, the calls that were always brief and cryptic, the constant vigilance. It was a life that never truly allowed for peace. One evening, after a particularly tense phone call where Adriano had been unusually distant, Isabella found herself questioning everything. Her mind wandered back to the promise he had made. You're safe with me. You'll never have to worry again. But as she sat in their grand dining room, staring out the large windows at the city below, she realized that safety meant something different in his world. It wasn't just about physical protection. It was about power, control, and the price they both paid for it. Adriano was gone for most of the day, as usual, and she had been left to her own thoughts. She could feel the walls of the mansion closing in around her, the silence almost suffocating. It wasn't until evening, when the soft click of the door opening interrupted her thoughts, that she finally saw him again. Adriano stood in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the dim light of the hallway. There was something different about him. His expression was harder, more guarded. Is everything all right? Isabella asked, her voice breaking the silence. Adriano closed the door behind him, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice low and serious. Isabella stood, her heart quickening at his tone. What's going on? He walked toward her, his steps deliberate, and for the first time, she noticed a subtle tension in his posture. There are things happening in my world that I can't protect you from, he said, his voice filled with an edge she hadn't heard before. The people I deal with, the business I'm involved in, it's not something you can just walk away from. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. She had known that this world was dangerous, but hearing him admit it so plainly made it all feel too real. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. What's happening? Adriano ran a hand through his hair, his gaze distant. I'm dealing with threats that go beyond just me. And now, you're involved. You've been dragged into this world, whether you like it or not. Isabella felt a chill creep up her spine. I never asked for this, she whispered, her mind racing. I never asked for any of this. Adriano's expression softened for just a moment, and he stepped closer to her. I know, he said quietly, but you're part of my life now, and I will do anything to protect you. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, and for a moment, Isabella felt the familiar warmth of his touch. But it was quickly overshadowed by the fear and uncertainty that clouded her mind. I don't want this life, Adriano, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to be part of this world. I want something normal. I want a future without all this danger. Adriano stepped back, his eyes searching hers, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of something in his gaze, something close to regret. I can't offer you normal, he said softly. Not in the way you want. But I can offer you a life where you're safe, where nothing will happen to you. Isabella closed her eyes, trying to steady her emotions. I don't know if that's enough, she whispered, the words feeling heavier with each passing second. I don't know if I can live like this. Adriano's silence hung in the air between them, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as though the weight of their unspoken fears had filled the room, making it impossible to breathe. Finally, he spoke again, his voice filled with determination. I won't let anything happen to you, Isabella, he said firmly. I know this life isn't what you imagined, but I need you to understand that this is the life I can give you. A life where you're protected, where you're mine. His words were like a chain, pulling her deeper into his world, whether she was ready for it or not. She had always been independent, always prided herself on being able to stand on her own 2 feet. But now, everything felt different. Adriano had made her a part of something far bigger than herself, and no matter how much she tried to fight it, she knew she couldn't walk away. What does that mean? She asked quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. What does it mean to be yours? Adriano's eyes softened, and he stepped closer, closing the distance between them. It means that I'll protect you, no matter what. It means that you'll never have to worry about anything again. It means that, in this world, you'll always have a place with me. Isabella felt the pull of his words, but there was still a part of her that resisted. She had never wanted to be anyone's possession. But as she looked at him, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the kind of love she had been waiting for. One that could protect her, one that could give her the future she had always dreamed of, even if it came with a price. And what about the price? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Adriano's gaze hardened once more. There's always a price, Isabella, he said, his voice low. But I'll make sure you never have to pay it alone. The words lingered in the air, and for the first time, Isabella felt the weight of her choices. She was part of his world now, and there was no turning back. The days following Adriano's confession were filled with a sense of both dread and anticipation for Isabella. She had heard the promise in his words, but there was an unsettling truth behind them, a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to accept. The life he offered her, the protection, the safety, it all came at a price. That price, she had come to realize, wasn't just about money or loyalty. It was about control, about being tied to a world that demanded more than she was willing to give. But every time she thought of walking away, she found herself frozen, unable to take that first step. Adriano was always there, his presence constant, a force that both shielded her and bound her. As the days passed, Isabella tried to push her doubts aside. She focused on her studies, on the future she could still have, one where she didn't have to rely on anyone else. But when Adriano was around, it was impossible to ignore the way he made her feel, the way he looked at her, the way his touch sent ripples of heat through her skin. She had always been independent, always prided herself on standing on her own. But now, every time he held her, every time he made her feel like she mattered, she felt herself slipping further into his world. She couldn't escape it, no matter how hard she tried. One night, as the city lights flickered through the windows, Isabella sat in the living room, trying to focus on a textbook. Her mind was scattered, and the words on the page blurred together. It wasn't until she heard the familiar sound of Adriano's footsteps in the hallway that she looked up. He stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment before stepping inside. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice soft yet commanding. Isabella closed the book, setting it aside. "Just tired," she replied, her voice distant. "I've been thinking." "About what?" Adriano asked, his tone light, but with a hint of concern. Isabella hesitated, unsure of how to voice the swirling thoughts in her mind. "About us," she said finally, looking up at him. "About this life." Adriano sat down beside her, his eyes never leaving hers. "What about it?" he asked, his voice calm, but his gaze intense. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can live like this, knowing that I'm always going to be in danger, that I'm always going to be part of a world I don't understand." Adriano reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "I've told you before," he said softly, his thumb brushing against her skin. "I will protect you. I will. Make sure you never have to worry. This world, it's not for everyone. But I need you to trust me." "I don't know how," she admitted, the weight of her words sinking in. "I want to trust you. But it's hard. It's so hard to let go of everything I've known." Adriano's expression softened, and he leaned in slightly, his face inches from hers. "You don't have to let go of everything. You're not alone in this, Isabella. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath as his words washed over her. She had spent so long protecting herself, keeping her guard up against the world and everyone in it. But Adriano was different. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't someone who would hurt her. She could feel it in the way he held her, in the way he promised to protect her. She had been scared, unsure of what this world meant for her future, but she was beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face it alone. "I'm scared, Adriano," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm scared of what's going to happen to us, to me, to our baby. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Adriano's gaze softened even further, and he pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her. "I know you're scared," he whispered, "but I'm here, and I'll never let anything happen to you. I promise." Isabella felt her heart steadying, the rush of emotions that had overwhelmed her only moments before beginning to fade away. She was scared, yes, but in his arms, she felt something else. She felt safe. "I don't know if I can ever fully trust this world," she murmured, resting her head against his chest. "But I trust you." Adriano's hand moved to her back, gently rubbing circles against her skin. "That's all I need," he said, his voice low and soothing. "You don't have to trust the world. Just trust me, and that's enough." The silence that followed was comfortable, the weight of their conversation lingering in the air. Isabella closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could find peace in this world. She didn't know what the future held, or what kind of life they would build together, but she knew that she didn't want to face it without him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And that thought, for now, was enough to make her believe in the possibility of a future she had never imagined. With him, with their child, and with a world that, despite its dangers, no longer seemed quite so impossible. Isabella woke up to the sound of soft rainfall outside, the morning light filtering through the curtains in their room. It had been weeks since she had fully adjusted to life with Adriano, and yet, every day seemed to bring new challenges, new questions. But today felt different. It wasn't the quiet, distant feeling she had become accustomed to. Today, there was something more, something deep inside her telling her that things were shifting once again. Adriano had been more present in recent days. He had always kept his distance, managing the empire that he had built with his own hands. But now he was here, in their home, by her side. And as their child's birth grew nearer, it seemed that the world was beginning to feel more real, more tangible. She wasn't just carrying his child anymore. She was part of something much bigger, something that meant she had to step fully into his world, even if it terrified her. As she lay there, staring out the window at the rain, she thought about the promise he had made to her. You will always be safe, always be mine. She had wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in the safety of his words. But the reality of their world was far more complicated than she had imagined. She was part of the Mafia now, and no matter how much she wanted to escape, she was bound to him, to them, to a life of power and danger. The phone rang beside her, and she picked it up, her heart racing when she saw Adriano's name on the screen. "Hello," she answered softly. "Isabella." His voice came through, calm but urgent. "I need you to meet me. There's something important we need to discuss." Her pulse quickened. Adriano never called for trivial matters. She knew this was serious. "Where?" she asked, her mind already racing through possible scenarios. "I'll send a car. Just be ready," he replied. Before hanging up, she knew something was coming, but she didn't know what. As she prepared, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened next would be a turning point. She had come to trust Adriano, but there were still things she didn't understand about his world, about his enemies, and the price they both had to pay for their safety. The car arrived in front of the mansion promptly, and she stepped inside, the driver silent as the car took her through the city's winding streets. The further they went, the more the city around her seemed to shift. They were heading toward a part of town she hadn't seen before, a quieter area, more secluded. When the car finally stopped, it was outside a building that looked like a fortress. "Wait here," the driver said, opening the door for her. She stepped out, her heels clicking on the pavement, her heart pounding with anticipation. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, but familiar. Adriano was waiting for her in a room filled with people she didn't recognize. There was an air of authority in the room, a weight that pressed down on everyone. As she walked in, Adriano turned, his eyes locking onto hers immediately. "Isabella," he said, his tone serious, but his gaze soft. "I needed you here." "What's going on?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety coursing through her. He motioned to the men around the table, their eyes trained on her. "There are things happening, Isabella. Things I need you to understand." The room seemed to hold its breath as Adriano began to speak, laying out a situation that was far more dangerous than she had imagined. There were threats against them, against her and their child. Enemies from within the organization, people who wanted to tear everything Adriano had built down. The words were sharp, cutting through her like a blade. But it wasn't the details that shook her. It was the realization that, for the first time, she was truly part of this world. Adriano wasn't just asking for her trust anymore. He was asking her to join him in the fight. "I need you to be strong," he said, his voice low and determined. "You're not just carrying our child. You're carrying the future of everything I've built. You're part of this now." Isabella's heart raced as the weight of his words sank in. She had always been independent, always told herself that she could handle everything on her own. But now, she realized, she was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for their future, for the life she had never imagined, the one that she was now bound to. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm with you, Adriano." The room shifted slightly at her words. A few of the men nodded in approval, their expressions unreadable. Adriano stepped closer to her, his hand gently touching her shoulder. "I knew you would be," he whispered. The feeling of solidarity, of finally accepting her place in this world, washed over her. It was terrifying, Yes, but it was also empowering. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was a part of something. "We're in this together," he said, his words a promise that resonated deeply in her chest. Isabella nodded, her mind focused on the road ahead. She didn't know what challenges they would face or what sacrifices they would have to make. But one thing was clear, she was not leaving. She was not running away from him, from this life, or from the future they would build together. As the door closed behind her, shutting her in the world she had once feared, she finally understood what it meant to truly belong. She wasn't just the woman he had chosen. She was part of his empire, part of his world, and for better or worse, she was ready to face whatever came next. Together, in this dark romance, Isabella finds herself entangled in a world of power, danger, and unexpected love as she becomes involved with Adriano, a mafia boss who offers her protection and a future. As their relationship deepens, Isabella struggles with the complexities of her new life, caught between her desire for independence and the undeniable pull of the man she has come to care for. The dark romance between them grows as she learns the true cost of safety and loyalty in a world where trust is a rare commodity. The story explores the emotional journey of a woman who must face her fears, confront her inner demons, and embrace the intense connection she shares with Adriano. With danger looming over them and enemies lurking in the shadows, Isabella must decide if she's willing to accept the life Adriano offers. One that comes with both love and peril. In this dark romance, every choice Isabella makes comes with a price, and as she dives deeper into this world, she discovers that love is not the only thing she will have to fight for. As secrets are revealed and betrayals unfold, Isabella must decide what kind of future she wants, and whether the dark romance she's living will consume her or set her free.